Hello again, friend. Welcome back to the kitchen. Today I'm celebrating one of the sweetest seasons of the year. It's maple season. If you love recipes with pure maple syrup, then this is your video. Today I'm going to be making 5 classic maple syrup recipes. They're all cozy, nostalgic, and absolutely delicious. So let's get into it. Today we're going to be making homemade maple fudge, traditional maple taffy rolled in the snow, a classic Québécois pudding chômeur, creamy maple butter, and of course the iconic butter tart with a maple twist. These are some of our favorite recipes to enjoy during the Canadian maple season. So if you want to come along with me and my family to the sugar bush, then grab your bottle of maple syrup and let's get started. First up is homemade maple fudge. If you love rich, creamy candy, this easy maple fudge recipe is a must try. It's made with pure maple syrup and a few simple ingredients. It cooks down to a smooth melt-in-your-mouth treat with pure maple flavor. This old-fashioned treat is perfect for gift giving. So if you want to try making maple fudge from scratch, this recipe is one of my favorites. I'm going to start this recipe with a large, sturdy sauce pot on medium-high heat. Add in 2 cups of white sugar, 1 1/4 cups of maple syrup, 2 tablespoons of corn syrup, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and 1 cup of milk. Now I'm going to let this whole mixture come to a boil. Now to make this fudge, you're going to want to make sure you're using pure maple syrup. And while any type of maple syrup will work for this recipe, my go-to is golden or amber. They are going to have a milder and lighter flavor. This is because we're going to be cooking down the syrup to make the fudge, which is already going to darken and intensify the maple flavor. While watching this mixture constantly, I'm going to heat it until it reaches 238 degrees Fahrenheit. This is often called soft ball. If you notice the maple mixture is bubbling up too much, move it off the heat for a few minutes until it settles down. Then just lower the heat of the stove before moving it back on. I like to use a candy thermometer to make my fudge. This just makes it easy to know when you've reached the proper temperature. But you can also make this recipe without a candy thermometer. To do this, keep a glass of cold water off to the side. With a spoon, drip a little bit of the cooked maple mixture into the water. Fish it out, and if it squeezes into a soft ball with your fingers, it's done. As soon as this sugar mixture is done, the steps are going to move quite quickly, so make sure you have everything ready to go. You can either make your fudge in little molds, or you can pour everything into a lined pan and then cut it into bite-sized fudge pieces once it's set. Now that my maple syrup mixture has reached that soft ball state, I'm ready to remove it from the heat. I'm going to immediately add in 2 tablespoons of butter. Allow the butter to melt in, and then you can stir the mixture until it's smooth and creamy. The fudge will start to set up quite quickly, so I'm going to immediately spread it into my lined tin or press it into the molds. Now all you need to do is set it aside to cool and set. After the fudge has reached room temperature, it's ready to remove from the molds or remove from your pan and cut into bite-sized chunks. This homemade maple fudge is rich, creamy, and captures that deep, natural sweetness of real maple syrup. It has the perfect smooth melt-in-your-mouth texture and bold maple flavor. This fudge is the perfect thing to gift to family and friends, or the perfect treat to celebrate maple season. And while this fudge recipe is absolutely perfect just as it is, to make it extra decadent, you can drizzle on some melted chocolate with a few sprinkles of flaky salt. This next recipe is definitely the favorite on my kids list. It's something we love doing every year at the Sugar Shack. This is maple taffy in the snow. For this classic maple season recipe, the hot maple syrup is poured over the snow, where it's going to thicken into a maple candy. It's sweet, sticky, and a really fun tradition during maple season. So if you're missing the sugar bush this year, well, we can make this recipe right at home. I'm going to start this recipe with 2 cups of pure maple syrup. And since this recipe only requires 1 ingredient, the quantity of maple syrup isn't really critical. You can make it with as much or as little maple syrup as you'd like. And once again, my preferred maple syrup for this recipe is going to be golden or amber. This is just going to give us a milder and creamier taffy, since we're starting out with a lighter syrup and we're going to be cooking it down. Once this syrup is cooked and ready to be shaped into taffy, the process is going to go pretty quickly. So it's important to get all the prep work done ahead of time. To do this, I'm going to fill a large flat tray with snow packed down tightly. And if you happen to be making this recipe and you don't have any snow on hand, you can do this exact same thing with tightly packed crushed ice, or you can freeze water into a large ice block. Just make sure whatever you're using is solid and frozen and not at all runny. Any excess moisture or water will affect the taffy. I'm also going to set some wooden sticks off to the side. This is what we're going to use to roll the taffy in the snow. Now that all the prep work's done, I'm going to heat the syrup on medium-high heat and bring it to a boil. There's no need to stir the syrup at all, but I am going to stay close and watch the bubbling syrup constantly until it reaches 240 degrees Fahrenheit or soft ball. And just like in the last recipe, if you don't have a candy thermometer, you can use the water glass method to test when it's done. Just drip some of the cooked syrup into the glass of cold water. If when you remove it, it squishes into a soft ball, it's ready to be formed into taffy. As soon as this happens, you can remove it from the heat. I'm going to transfer mine into a little glass measuring cup. This just makes it easier to pour the lines of syrup. Now all we need to do is pour thin lines of syrup onto the snow. Place a popsicle stick or whatever you're using to roll your taffy onto one end of each line. Then press and roll the cooked taffy into a lollipop shape. I just keep pressing it into the snow to help it solidify as I roll. And these little maple lollipops are ready to serve right away. This homemade maple taffy in the snow is a classic Canadian maple season treat that celebrates the rich flavor of pure maple syrup. It's a fun and delicious way to enjoy authentic maple syrup desserts during maple season, and is a fan favorite of kids and adults alike. So if you want to bring the fun and flavors of the sugar bush right to your own home, this is the perfect recipe to try. Now we're moving on to a warm and comforting French-Canadian dessert. This is Pouding Chômeur. This classic Quebec maple dessert, it's a soft cake baked inside a maple syrup sauce. As this dessert's baking in the oven, the cake comes to the top and the maple sauce thickens underneath. When we were at the Pancake House this year, this recipe was definitely on the list. I'm going to start this recipe with my creamy maple syrup sauce. In a sauce pot over medium-low heat, mix together 1 cup of maple syrup and 1 cup of water. I'm going to let this come to a low boil while I get on with making the cake. In a large bowl, mix together 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, a half teaspoon of salt, and 1 cup of sugar. I'm just going to give this a quick whisk to mix all the dry ingredients together. Now to the same bowl, I'm going to pour in 3/4 of a cup of milk, a 1/4 cup of melted butter, 2 eggs, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. With my whisk, I'm just going to mix this super simple cake batter until it just comes together. And I'm going to pour the batter into my greased 8 by 8 inch pan. Now that maple mixture that we did at the beginning has been bubbling away. I'm going to very gently pour the hot maple syrup on top of the cake batter. And this simple dessert is ready to get popped into my preheated 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 180 degrees Celsius oven. It's going to bake for 40 to 45 minutes, or until the top of the cake is golden caramelized and set in the middle. After removing it from the oven, I'm just going to let it cool slightly, about 5 minutes. This cake is best served warm and fresh. And I'm going to serve it by turning each slice over so the creamy maple syrup pudding layer is on top of each slice. This simple yet flavorful dessert is perfect to serve just as it is, Or you can add a little whipped cream, ice cream, or some fresh fruit to go on the side. This homemade Pouding Chômeur is a beloved French-Canadian maple syrup dessert. The fluffy, moist cake is baked in the rich, buttery maple syrup sauce, infusing the whole thing with an intense maple flavor. This classic Quebec recipe is simple to make and perfect for anyone craving a cozy maple syrup dessert made at home. Next up is another simple one-ingredient recipe. This is maple butter, or sometimes called maple cream. It's a homemade spread made from pure maple syrup. First, we're going to cook the syrup down, then whip it until it's light and creamy. Perfect for spreading on toast, pancakes, waffles, or you can even sandwich it in between some cookies. So if you've ever wanted to try making maple butter from maple syrup, then you've got to try this recipe. In a large sauce pot on medium heat, add in your desired amount of maple syrup. Since this is another one-ingredient recipe, you can make whatever amount of maple butter that you'd like. I'm going to allow my maple syrup to come to a simmer, and then I'm going to reduce the temperature down to medium-low. And once again, you're going to need to constantly be watching the syrup as it cooks. This time we're going to let the maple syrup cook and simmer until it reaches the red, which is 230 degrees Fahrenheit or 110 degrees Celsius. This time we want a smooth, creamy, spreadable consistency. As soon as this happens, I'm going to remove it from the heat. And to help it cool down even more quickly, I'm going to carefully pour it into a heat-proof bowl that I'm going to be mixing it in. I'm going to let it cool to just about room temperature. The temperature for this part does not have to be exact. Then all I need to do is whip my maple butter into a creamy consistency. The more you whip it, the stiffer the butter will be. So make sure you don't overmix it. The butter is going to stay liquid for a few minutes after whipping, but will start to set up quite quickly, so transfer it immediately to the container that you're going to store it in. And your maple butter is ready to use right away. This rich maple spread is naturally sweet and silky. It's perfect for toast, pancakes, waffles, biscuits, and scones, or even sandwich it inside your favorite cookie. And finally, we can't talk about Canadian desserts without mentioning the butter tart. This recipe has a maple syrup twist. This flaky pastry is filled with a rich maple filling. These are sweet, buttery, and completely irresistible. So if you're a fan of butter tarts, you've got to give this maple version a try. It's the perfect way to celebrate maple season. Now to start this recipe, we're going to of course need some pastry for our tarts. I have a great pie dough recipe that I'll put in the description box below if you want to give that one a try. Then all you need to do is roll it out and cut it into little disc shapes. Then I'm going to line them into a muffin cup for 12 tart shells. Now you can use your own homemade tart shells, or you can use the store-bought version, which look like this. Now all I have to do is mix the ingredients for the filling. I'm going to use a large measuring cup like this just because it makes it really easy to pour it into the shells. For the filling, I'm going to add in 1 cup of brown sugar, a half cup of pure maple syrup, 2 eggs, a 1/4 cup of melted butter, and about 1/8 teaspoon of salt. I'm just going to whisk all these ingredients together until everything is smooth and well incorporated. Now after making these, I did notice that using the store-bought shells that were already pre-lined with a foil liner would have benefited from blind baking them first. However, the homemade pastry cooked directly in my muffin tin came out beautifully golden on the bottom. So keep that in mind when you're baking your shells. For my butter tarts today, I'm going to make half of them with raisins and half of them plain. But you can substitute in your favorite mix-ins, like currants, chopped nuts, or even chocolate chips. Pour the filling into the tart shells, leaving about 1/4 inch of space at the top. The filling will puff up slightly as it's baking in the oven. And now my tarts are ready to go into my preheated 375 degrees Fahrenheit or 190 degrees Celsius oven and bake for 20 minutes or until the filling has puffed up and looks caramelized on top. After removing them from the oven, let them cool until they're room temperature or just slightly warm. The filling should be soft, gooey, and slightly runny. They're the perfect balance of sweet buttery flavor and silky texture. These are definitely one of the all-time favorite maple syrup desserts in our house. And there you have it, 5 incredible recipes to help you celebrate maple season. All these delicious homemade desserts are the perfect way to enjoy a bottle of maple syrup. I hope these recipes gave you some inspiration to try your own Canadian desserts and homemade maple treats. Thanks so much for stopping by the kitchen. I'll see you in the next video. Make sure you click on the description box below this video for links to all the recipes. Thanks for stopping by.